Tonight at 10, tens of millions of women in the US have lost their constitutional right to abortion after a Supreme Court ruling.
We did it!
It's a landmark decision that's led to triumph
Keep abortion safe and legal!
and to despair, polarizing an already divided nation.
The court literally taking America back 150 years. This is a sad day for the country, in my view. But it doesn't mean the fight's over.
The right to life has been vindicated. The voiceless will finally have a voice.
With nearly half of America's states expected to use the ruling to ban or restrict abortion, we'll be asking what happens now. And our other main story tonight. Two severe by-election blows for Boris Johnson. The Tories lose Tiverton and Honiton in Devon and Wakefield in West Yorkshire. His reply?
Yes, it's absolutely true that we've had some tough by-election results, and they've been, I think, a reflection of a lot of things, but we've got to recognise that voters are going through a tough time at the moment.
Second earthquake in Afghanistan, in a region where at least 1,000 people are known to have died. And Glastonbury Festival kicks off at Worthy Farm with hundreds of thousands of revellers set to enjoy a weekend of music.
And in the sport on BBC News, Johnny Bairstow leads an incredible England fight back at Headingley on the second day of the third test against New Zealand.
Good evening. 50 years of a legally enshrined right to abortion in the United States has been brought to an end after the country's Supreme Court decided to overturn its landmark ruling made in 1973. It means that tens of millions of women across the US do not have their right to an abortion guaranteed by the Constitution, and individual US states are now legally entitled to ban the procedure. Nearly half of America's 50 states are expected to do so, and 13 have already passed so-called trigger laws, which outlaw or severely restrict abortion automatically following the court's ruling. It is a momentous decision which has delighted and enraged Americans. Well, our North America editor Sarah Smith is at the Supreme Court for us now. Sarah.
Protests have been growing here outside the court all day as people absorb this dramatic news. Whether you agree with the ruling or not, this is a seismic moment in America, as almost 5 decades of guaranteed abortion rights have been immediately and totally reversed. This is a huge, historic moment for America. As they hear the news from the court, there's jubilation from anti-abortionists.
Life won today! Life won today!
Life won today, they chant, celebrating a victory after almost 50 years.
You know, I've seen the devastation abortion has wrought on our country on a communal level and on a personal level. And it's so vindicating to know that we can now take tangible steps to lessen the violence of abortion in our country.
10 years ago, did you ever imagine this would happen?
I imagined it a lot, but people told me it was impossible, that we would never see this kind of victory. And now I know that victory is not only possible, it's happened. So we are going to work off of this momentum. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep fighting, and we're going to build a better world.
Fury from those campaigning to keep the guaranteed right to abortion, promising to fight back.
It's not the will of the people, and this country is supposed to run off of the will of the people. I'm 21 and I'm terrified.
We have a lot of work to do to make that happen, but we will never give up.
It's 50 years since there was last a significant decision on abortion rights in America. It might be another 50.
More, sure. But we're not going to stop. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what they say. Again, abortions will continue. They just won't be legal, and women will die from botched abortions.
It's obvious this ruling is not going to end the arguments over abortion in America. In fact, it will inflame them. In this deeply polarized society, abortion is already one of the most divisive issues. Even the president is powerless to change the court's ruling.
With this decision, the conservative majority of the Supreme Court shows how extreme it is, how far removed they are from the majority of this country. They've made the United States an outlier among developed nations in the world. But this decision must not be the final word.
Abortion rights have been fought over for decades.
Good evening. In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortions.
In 1973, the Supreme Court ruled in the test case of Roe versus Wade that women must have access to abortion across America. A decision totally reversed today.
It is my profound honor to be the first president in history to attend the March for Life.
As president, Donald Trump deliberately appointed 3 pro-life justices to the court, making today's ruling possible. He says God made the decision. In fact, it was 6 of the 9 judges.
By a vote of 6-3, the court affirmed that the power to protect unborn life is returned to the people and their elected representatives. The people have won a victory.
Jesus loves the little children.
Anti-abortion activists view today's victory as merely a first step. They will now take their campaigns to every state which continues to allow terminations, trying to get abortion banned in the whole of the United States. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Washington.
Well, as we mentioned earlier, there are 13 so-called trigger states which already have laws in place to immediately ban abortion now that Roe versus Wade has been overturned. One of them is Arkansas, whose Attorney General has this evening signed the ban into law. Our correspondent Sophie Long has had special access to an abortion clinic in the state, which is now having to turn women away. And there are distressing details in her report.
It was exactly the ruling they'd been dreading. But the expectation didn't make the court's decision any less devastating.
Abortion is murder. It's just been upheld.
Outside, they had to turn women away.
This isn't a country that I ever thought I would know. I thought that this country would still care about people, would still care about women.
Inside, they had to come to terms with the fact that the care they provided here is now a criminal offence.
I don't think there's a waiting period there, but it is about a 5.5-hour drive. And see, it's like having to turn women away, like, that sucks.
Jennifer Thompson first came here as a patient. She says her abortion saved her life, and the care she received here inspired her to train so she could do the same for others.
Now I have to tell them, I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do for you. I'm sorry that your boyfriend beats you every day and that he rapes you all the time. There's nothing I can do. You're going to have to find somewhere else to go. I mean, I can give them information to help them try, but it's heartbreaking, man. Like, you know, this place saved my life, literally.
This is how I usually chart.
For more than 10 years, Dr. Willie Parker has travelled here from another state because the restrictive laws and the threat of violence or financial ruin has long been too great for local doctors to carry out abortions here themselves.
I feel angry in the way that anybody who is deeply vested in human rights should feel angry and outraged and indignant anytime they are witnessing injustice. We will come to recognize the full cost of criminalizing abortion when we start to see the bump in the rise in maternal mortality and morbidity, suffering and death related to conditions that are unique to pregnancy.
I put that to the woman who fought back tears of joy as she signed Arkansas's almost total ban on abortion into law. It makes no exception for rape or incest. A termination can only take place now in the case of maternal medical emergency.
Well, I don't know if that doctor has any facts to base that hypothetical answer on. We don't have any information to base that conclusion that this doctor has come up with. And hopefully, you know, this law that we're putting in place specifically says to save the life of a mother.
For the anti-abortion protesters outside the clinic, this is a good day.
We will not fully celebrate until abortion is eradicated fully from our land, until Little Rock Family Planning Services, for example, is closed down and does not reopen. Then we can celebrate for sure.
They will continue their fight, but the Supreme Court's ruling will fundamentally change the course of the lives of all the women who passed the protesters every day to provide the care they did here, along with those of millions of others across the United States. Sophie Long, BBC News, Little Rock, Arkansas.
Let's talk to Sarah Smith now. Sarah, such a hugely consequential decision this. What happens now?
Well, already several states have enacted immediate bans on abortion, and more will follow in the days and weeks to come. You heard President Biden there saying he thinks this is a sad day for America. Well, even though he and the Democrats control the White House and both houses of Congress, there's nothing they can do about this Supreme Court ruling. And the Democrats don't have enough votes in the Senate to be able to pass a new law that would guarantee abortion rights. So for now, President Biden says what he can do is try to make sure that women who want abortions but live in states that have banned the procedure are able to travel to other places where the termination can still be performed, places like New York State, which now says it's a safe haven for women seeking the procedure. And this really radical decision that has come from this very conservative Supreme Court is not necessarily going to stop here. We heard one of the justices today making it clear that he thinks that the court should now revisit some other progressive rulings, the ones that guarantee things like access to abortion or legalise same-sex marriage. It's possible that the court could look again at these, and their inbuilt conservative majority could overturn them. There could be really significant and sweeping change coming to America.
Sarah, many thanks. And there's more in the way of updates, news and analysis on BBC News Online. That's at bbc.co.uk/news, and also, of course, by using the BBC News app. Now to our other main story tonight. Boris Johnson has suffered a series of major political blows, with the Conservatives losing 2 by-elections in the north and south of England, and the party's chairman resigning from the cabinet. It's the first time a governing party has lost 2 by-elections on the same day for over 30 years. Tiverton and Honiton in Devon, a former Tory stronghold, saw the Lib Dems overturning a massive 24,000 majority to take the seat. And Labour regained Wakefield in West Yorkshire, a seat it had lost to the Conservatives in 2019. Following the defeats, the Tory party chairman, Oliver Dowden, resigned, saying in a letter to Boris Johnson that we cannot carry on with business as usual. And the former party leader, Michael Howard, has said that Mr Johnson should step down. But the Prime Minister, on a trip to Rwanda, was defiant, saying there was more for his government to do. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young.
Liberal Democrats are getting used to toppling Tories in by-elections, but this victory broke all records. The winning candidate said voters had sent a message.
Your behaviour, Mr Johnson, makes a mockery of leadership. By any measure, you are unfit to lead.
This was one of the safest Conservative seats in the country. Their losing candidate couldn't get out quick enough.
Helen, do you not want to say thank you to everyone?
In Wakefield, it was Labour celebrating. At the last election, they lost dozens of seats like this that they'd held for decades. They hope this is a sign they can win them back, and they think Mr Johnson is helping their cause.
Boris Johnson, your contempt for this country is no longer tolerated.
As dawn broke, the Conservative Party chairman decided to quit. Oliver Dowden's letter to his leader was polite but pointed. Our supporters are distressed and disappointed by recent events, and I share their feelings. We cannot carry on with business as usual. Somebody must take responsibility. And for the first time, former Conservative leader Michael Howard is calling on Boris Johnson to do just that.
I think the country needs new leadership, and I think the time has now come to provide it. His biggest asset has always been his ability to win votes, but I'm afraid yesterday's results make it clear that he no longer has that ability.
The Prime Minister, though, is more than 6,000 miles away in Rwanda at a Commonwealth get-together and says it would be crazy for him to resign.
When people are finding it tough, they send messages to politicians, and politicians have got to respond.
But would he take personal responsibility for the results?
People will continue to beat me up and say this or that about, and to attack me. That's fine. That's quite right. That is the job of politicians. In the end, voters, journalists, they have no one else to make their complaints to. I have to take that, but I also have to get on with the job of delivering for the people of this country.
The Conservatives have now been in power here for 12 years. There's been a pandemic. There's a cost of living crisis. Not the kind of political backdrop where you'd expect a government to be doing well in by-elections. But dozens of Conservative MPs think that Boris Johnson's leadership is making things worse, that voters are finding any way they can to punish the party. Labour's path back to power is steep, but Sir Keir Starmer insists the result in Wakefield is more than a protest vote.
This is hugely significant for the Labour Party, and I'm so proud that we can present that confident Labour Party utterly focused on the voters. That's what I wanted to achieve, and this is evidence that we're on course for a Labour government.
The Liberal Democrats are on the march in southern England.
OK, is that close enough?
And their leader says that's partly down to Mr Johnson's unpopularity.
Under Boris Johnson's leadership, things keep getting worse. So let me tell the Prime Minister what the British people expect. They expect to be led, and to be led with decency.
Labour have had a good win, the Lib Dems a spectacular one. It's a combination which could be fatal to the Conservatives' chances of staying in power. Vicky Young, BBC News, Westminster.
Well, let's take a closer look now at the two by-election results and the change since the general election. So, in 2019, the Conservatives gained Wakefield from Labour by just under 3,500 votes. Labour had held this seat since the 1930s and they've won it back with a majority of just under 5,000. But those numbers pale by comparison with what happened in Tiverton and Honiton, which the Conservatives won in 2019 with a massive majority of over 24,000. Now the Liberal Democrats have overturned it to take a seat that they've never held before with a majority of just over 6,000. Now, look at how the share of the vote in Wakefield has changed. The Conservatives in 2019 were over 7 points ahead of Labour. Now it's Labour 17 points ahead of the Tories. And look too at the drop in the Liberal Democrat vote last night compared with 3 years ago. It does suggest an element of tactical voting by Lib Dem supporters. And in Tiverton, the figures are even more stark. The Conservatives were way ahead of both rival parties back in 2019. Now the Liberal Democrats have leapfrogged over Labour and increased their vote share by a massive 39 points. And look again at the drop in Labour's performance in those 3 years. Here it's their supporters who appear to have voted tactically. As for the swing in Wakefield, it was 12.7% from Conservative to Labour, and in Tiverton from Tory to Lib Dem it was a whopping 29.9%. So what would all this mean if the result in Wakefield were replicated in a general election, assuming no change, that is, in other parties' support? Well, it would result in Labour being 1 seat short of an overall majority. And if we took Tiverton as a guide, then the Lib Dems would do vastly better. Well, our deputy political editor, Vicky Young, joins us now. And Vicky, bearing all of that in mind, where does this now leave Boris Johnson?
Well, Rita, those graphs you've been showing there are what make Conservative MPs extremely nervous. The idea that thousands of people can switch their vote and get behind the candidate best placed to beat the Tory. Now, what those MPs will be weighing up is, why is it happening? Is it just midterm blues? Or actually, is this about Boris Johnson, his leadership, his character? He's been asked that lots of times today. He won't really engage with it. He just says he's got lots of work to do and he's going to carry on. He's not going to resign. So, is is he safe? Well, the rules at the moment mean that for a year they can't hold another confidence vote in him. But there are suggestions tonight that lots of MPs might be trying to change that. The other thing that could change the dial could be a senior cabinet minister walking out. No sign of that either. But this is all chipping away at Mr Johnson's authority. Lots in the party still think he'll have to go. They just don't know quite how it's going to happen.
Vicky, many thanks. Vicky Young reporting. Ukraine has begun withdrawing its forces from one of its remaining strongholds, the city of Severodonetsk in the eastern Luhansk area. That's according to the region's top official. It marks a significant step in the war. Taking Severodonetsk would bring President Putin closer to gaining control of the whole eastern Donbass region, a key Russian aim. From Donbass, our international correspondent Orla Gration reports.
This is Severodonetsk, a strategic city once home to 100,000 people. It's been shelled for months by Russian forces who can claim a key victory here. Ukraine ordered its troops to retreat from the rubble rather than die in vain. They fought here building to building and street to street. Some of the fiercest battles of the war. But they were outgunned by Russia's heavy artillery. We reached this commander who left at dawn under fire, pained by the retreat. 16 of his men died trying to save the city.
It is drenched in the blood of Ukraine's defenders, of my brothers, and mine too. It was incredibly hard. At that moment, I felt despair. But it's okay. It's not over. Our leadership saved the troops to fight another day. Maybe that's the right decision. I know for sure that we will be back there.
His fighters in the Svoboda or Freedom Battalion are a mix of old and young. Like 22-year-old Sem. He got married on the 13th of this month, and he was killed 5 days later. Young as he was, he led his own unit in Europe's biggest war for more than 70 years. All volunteers, a brotherhood. The Ukrainians were resourceful. They had to be, using inflatable boats to get in and out and bring supplies after all the bridges to Severodonetsk were blown. But they lost this battle as they waited for advanced weapon systems from their Western allies. Day by day, President Putin is destroying more cities and gaining more ground in a war which NATO has warned could last for years. Orla Gration, BBC News, Donbass.
Here, there's been another significant increase in COVID infections, up about 300,000 in the last week. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, is here to examine the numbers. Hugh.
Yes, Rita, a sharp rise in COVID infections according to the latest ONS household survey. It suggests that 1.7 million people in the UK had the virus last week. That was up 23% on the week before. And there were varying case rates in the UK's nations. Scotland had the highest. 1 in 20 had the virus last week. In England, it was 1 in 40. In Wales, 1 in 45. And Northern Ireland, 1 in 30 people. Health officials have said today that more than half of COVID cases are driven by newer strains of the Omicron variant, known as BA4 and BA5, which spread more rapidly. They've stressed again the importance of getting vaccinated.
We've very little evidence that it causes more severe disease. However, we are concerned that there are a number of people, particularly in the higher risk groups, the over 75s or those that are immunosuppressed, who haven't come forward for their 4th dose in the spring booster. And those people we think, could get the consequences of severe COVID. So we're urging people, if they've been offered their 4th dose, to come forward.
So far, hospital numbers remain relatively low, thanks to vaccines and Omicron being milder than previous variants. This chart shows the number of daily COVID hospital admissions in the UK, the dark line representing the underlying trend. Around 2,500 in late March, just under 1,000 now, but rising. Some, though, are patients with other conditions who've tested positive. Health officials think those numbers could go up further. So how will the vaccination programme continue from here? Well, fourth jabs are set to be available to 65-year-olds and older from the autumn, but it's not clear about those who are younger. Rita.
Hugh, thank you. A second earthquake has shaken an area in southeastern Afghanistan, causing yet more death and destruction. More than 1,000 people are known to have died in the quakes in Paktika province, which is one of the poorest areas in one of the poorest countries in the world. From Gration, Sikandar Kamani reports.
Scrambling for scraps of bread. For survivors of this earthquake, support is flowing in, but more is needed. We're in Gration district, close to the epicentre. Hundreds of homes have been destroyed, families wiped out. There are still injuries to treat. This charity normally removes landmines, but now they've set up a mobile clinic. 5-year-old Barakatullah had his arm trapped by rubble. There are lots of wounded children, Nakibullah tells us. 12 patients had to be flown to Kabul by helicopter because they needed specialist care. Nearby, we meet Zarma Gul, his home reduced to rubble. When the earthquake struck, he faced a terrible dilemma: who to save first. When the ceiling fell down, my wife cried out for help. But my daughter was in the room with us, and I took her out first. Then I went to my other children. By the time he returned to his wife, she had died. The winding dirt roads leading to the remote, worst affected villages are now busy with trucks carrying supplies from the Taliban government and humanitarian agencies.
Aid is arriving. The UN are here, as are international charities and domestic ones. But this is a country that was already struggling with a dire economic and humanitarian crisis.
The Red Crescent is distributing packs with essentials, blankets and cooking oil. We need everything, because everything we owned has been buried in the dirt, this man says. Across the road, one large extended family is setting up tents they've just received, their homes having been destroyed. 7 of their relatives were killed, including 4 young children. There's no meaning to my life anymore, Remet Gul tells us. I saw my 3 daughters and 4 grandchildren die. My heart is broken. We need help. We have nothing, he says. Whatever we owned has been destroyed. Back by the main bazaar, now an aid depot, the crowd waiting for donations has grown. A weary population struggling with a new crisis. Sikandar Kamani, BBC News, Paktika province.
The former BBC presenter Harry Gration has died suddenly at the age of 71. Gration's BBC career spanned more than 40 years.
Do you know something? I just love my job. Owen is with us now. So,
a household name in the north of England, where he presented Look North from 1982 until he retired 2 years ago. Harry Gration won 4 Royal Television Society awards for his presenting and journalism, and was well known for his love of sport and rugby league in particular. The BBC's Director General Tim Davie said he was an outstanding broadcaster and would be hugely missed. Harry Gration, who died suddenly today at the age of 71. Now, Glastonbury Festival's main stage opened today after 3 years of COVID cancellations. Our culture editor Katie Razzle has been down at Worthy Farm, where she spoke to Wolf Alice, who won Best Band at this year's Brits, and a warning her report contains flashing images.
It's the 50th birthday party, twice postponed. Finally, Glastonbury is back. With its youngest ever headliner, Billie Eilish, taking to the Pyramid stage.
I can talk to anyone.
Sam Fender's never even been to this festival before. Now he knows what it's like to perform here in front of thousands.
Let's have some fun.
Brit winners Wolf Alice nearly didn't make it today after their original flight from America, where they were touring, was cancelled.
What is it about Glastonbury that means you just didn't want to miss it?
For everything about it, I think. I mean, especially playing on the Pyramid stage, it's like a dream come true.
I think every gig we've played since, well, post-COVID, not that it's gone anywhere, but since we've been allowed to play live, it's been like fever pitch.
200,000 people are here in this city that springs up from the Somerset countryside. But for 3 long years, the cows have had this place to themselves.
2, 3, 4.
Now all sorts have been marching into Worthy Farm.
I'm just excited to be free for 5 days from anything else in the world.
You could go here, your mum could go here, do you know what I mean? It's great.
It's great to be back in a place where everyone's having a good time, especially with the last 3 years have just been an absolute myth.
Sir Paul McCartney's the headline act tomorrow. Tonight, 15 miles away, a few hundred lucky souls in Frome were treated to a warm-up gig by an 80-year-old who clearly just loves being on stage. This weekend, McCartney will make history as this festival's oldest ever headliner. Katie Razzle, BBC News, Glastonbury.
Time for the weather now. Here's Thomas. Thomas.
Rita, thank you, and good evening to you. I think Worthy Farm is in for some showers this weekend, and indeed many of us across western parts of the UK could catch 1 or 2 downpours as we go through the course of Saturday and Sunday. Here's the satellite picture, a lot happening on it, clouds swirling around. This is the low pressure that's sweeping in off the Atlantic, and it's going to park itself over Ireland, and this is that fresher air tucking in behind this cold front here. So here are the isobars. That means basically strong winds blowing around the area of low pressure, shower clouds circling around it and sweeping across western areas of the UK. So this is what it looks like through the course of Saturday morning. Already showers affecting the West Country, Wales, Irish Sea coasts and also Northern Ireland and Scotland. Temperatures around 15 in some spots, so not particularly cold. And then we're going to zoom in a little bit more and show you where the showers are going to be through the course of the afternoon. So this is around about lunchtime. Showers dotted around across Scotland. Could be some persistent rain for a time heading to Northern Ireland. Most frequent showers, I think, around the Lake District, Lancashire, Wales, down into the southwest. Least frequent showers around East Anglia. You can see the orange colours here, so warmer, sunnier, temperatures up to 22 in Norwich, 22 in Hull, whereas out towards the west, only 16 for places like Belfast. And then as we head towards Sunday, this low pressure edges just that little bit closer. The cloud becomes more extensive around western areas. So I think at times, a little more than just a few showers, perhaps persistent rain, so only 16 for Glasgow. But again, if you're in the east, along the North Sea coast, East Anglia, the southeast, the weather's looking absolutely fine. Skies probably a bit like this. Let's have a look at the outlook into next week. Lots of shower icons on our forecast here. Temperatures typically in the teens. Clearly, you're the winner if you like fine weather there in the south and the southeast with lots of fine, bright weather.
Looks lovely. Thank you, Thomas. And that is tonight's BBC News at 10. You can, of course, keep up with all the latest developments on the BBC website. From all the team here, it is goodbye. But the news continues on BBC One, as now it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Good night.